So I'm an independent chartered psychologist. I'm also an associate lecturer at the University of Plymouth. I'm a member of the medical committee for the Pituitary Foundation, and my speciality is the link between mental and physical health. There we go. So what I'm going to talk about is what do we mean by life changes? What kind of things are we talking about? Have a little think about trauma and stress, because excuse me, because for some people, life changes are not just stressful, they can actually be traumatic. So how would you know if that was the case for you? And then I thought what might be useful was looking at strategies for how we manage life changes, various things that we can potentially try. So the second half is very much around what kinds of things could we potentially do to manage aspects of the life changes that we find ourselves confronted with. So what do we mean by life changes? Most people, I think, if you said, what do you think of as a key life event? They would think about those things at the top of that list on the left-hand side there, things like bereavement, divorce, etc. So this list is actually a part of a questionnaire. It's called the Holmes and Rahe Stress Scale, and it comes from the 1960s. The reason that I like it as a tool or as a questionnaire is the fact that it acknowledges that these things are stressful and difficult for people, and that if you have several of these kinds of things happening in a year, then if you're normal and healthy, you can expect it to have an impact on your health. So if you already have a chronic health condition, like a pituitary condition, then that much more likely that it's going to have some kind of significant impact on you. The values that they put on these various things, I think, are hilarious. And so just ignore the values. The reason I've put this on here is because it addresses the range of the different things that we can potentially find ourselves faced with and having to cope with. This is not extensive. There's 43 items here. You would be able to think of more things that are not on this list that would also kind of count as key life events, significant life changes. They're not all bad. Getting married is, most people look forward to that. It's kind of, I guess you might not so much if it was a shotgun wedding, literally, as in, like I've seen on some films back from the Wild West, and they're standing at the altar and there's literally a guy with a shotgun behind them. That's possibly quite stressful. But marriage that's kind of entered into willingly, or engagement, that kind of thing, yeah, it's kind of, they're things that we look forward to, like buying a new house, having getting your first home. It's increasingly difficult. It's something we might look forward to, but actually can be quite stressful. I remember when we bought this house, I remember crying because I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own. It's kind of like, if this all goes wrong, what am I going to do? So things can be very, very stressful, even when you're looking forward to them, and you want them to happen. And then there's things on here that you might not think of as being stressful, but actually they really are. So things like changes at work. So on that left-hand side there, we've got business readjustment. I've been through several of those, and on every occasion they have been phenomenally difficult for all the staff involved, regardless of whether you're the head honcho who's decided that this is necessary, to the people kind of answering the phones and on the reception desk. It's difficult from top to tail. Uncertainty, the uncertainty of those kinds of things. There are some things on here, like death of a close friend. Our society is a little bit odd in the way that we deal with death. There are some kinds of loss that we see as being more understandable than others. So if you've lost a parent, a partner, a brother or sister, someone like that, we kind of say, "Oh, your grief is justified." If it's a close friend, we kind of go, "You've got a week, and if you're not over it by then, you're just being self-indulgent," which I think is ridiculous. It's kind of losing someone who is important to you is really, really hard. But as a society, we don't tend to recognise that very much. Um, so yeah, it's there's a range of different things that potentially can have impacts for us. Um, some of them are about life transitions. They're not just about um, trouble at mill, as they say where I'm from. Um, so key characteristics of life changes. I think probably if I had to say what's the key thing about life changes, um, I would say they're the things that don't happen very often, but they are significant. They tend to have quite long time frames. They tend to be things that start and then run on for weeks or months, or some cases actually years. Um, they have a profound impact across all or many domains of life. So they don't just affect you. So if you're having significant impact or changes at work, that potentially will ripple out into other areas of your life because it'll be playing on your mind. Um, they have significant psychosocial impact. Um, they may come out of a clear blue sky. You may not expect it. So sudden bereavement, for example, is known to be uh, particularly challenging and difficult for people to deal with. As I've already said, there might be things that we're looking forward to, like getting married, like graduating, like getting a house. Um, there may be things that we have to deal with on top of everything else that we've got going on. Um, they can be transitions into new life stages, and that can include retirement, actually. And for men in particular, um, transition into retirement can be particularly problematic and quite stressful and difficult. And quite a lot of places now, if you're retiring from work, in the year or 18 months before retirement, there are courses now to help people make that transition into retirement to try and make it easier for people. Um, so key characteristics of life changes, yes, they can be about all of these things, and they mark important milestones um, in our life course. So they are very significant and they matter to us. In terms of the psychosocial impact, this first one, this first block here, anxiety and excitement, so you kind of might be thinking, what? The thing is, from a physiological point of view, if you're standing at the bottom of a roller coaster waiting to get on, and I wired you up to see what's happening to your skin conductance and your heart rate and all the rest of it, those readings wouldn't actually tell me whether you're anxious or excited. You've actually got to tell me. Physiologically, the two states are the same. So I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You would actually have to label it. So perception sometimes plays a really important part. Some people hate roller coasters, find them incredibly anxiety provoking. Other people love them and can't wait to go on the next monster ride. They find it very exciting. Um, Actors, back in the day, I trained to work in the theatre. We were told to manage our stress and anxiety, always view it as a form of excitement because it's a more positive way of managing it, and you're less likely to end up with your head in the fire bucket. So it could go either way. It depends on your perception. Um, the kinds of life events that we find ourselves confronted with can lead to what's called overstimulation and overwhelm. So, overstimulation is where you're having to do an awful lot of things that maybe you're not used to, um, having to see a lot of people, go to a lot of new places, and all of that stimulation, having to think about things more. Because, as I said, you're taking this on top of all the other things that you've already got going on, can lead to overwhelm and that sense of actually I don't think I can do this, I need to slow down. It's kind of it's getting difficult. um not it doesn't mean that you're not coping well. It's just a sign of the impact, and it's a normal thing, particularly with certain life changes. Um, Overstimulation and overwhelm, those kinds of things. Yes, for some people, the stress associated with certain life changes can cause problems with eating. Now, that again can go either way. You can end up with people whose stress response basically means that they lose their appetite and they can't eat. And you end up with other people um, who end up eating an awful lot more than they would do normally. And some people end up with sleeping problems. Um, so the commonest one is having difficulties getting off to sleep or waking up in the early hours and your mind's churning. Um, Unfortunately, as I've already said, if you have a lot of life events within a short-ish period of time, it can affect your health. So there is an acknowledgement that certainly things like sudden bereavement or bereavement, even if it's not sudden, is known to have a significant impact on your endocrine system and also on your immune system. And it does, and that can last for a year or more in terms of increasing your vulnerability to things. So it can be problematic for people. And if you have an awful lot of things happening in a very short space of time, it is entirely possible that it could lead to burnout, which is where you just really can't cope, and you need to stop, and other people need to take over and do some things because your system can't cope anymore. Hopefully, it doesn't get that bad, but this is to say that yeah, it can be difficult. Um, it's not just necessarily stress that people experience. Sometimes people also find the change traumatic. So being diagnosed with a pituitary condition would count as a key life event. For some people, their process of diagnosis, they may well have experienced it as being quite traumatic. Because for all that healthcare professionals try and be very careful in the language that they use, if someone says to you, we have detected a tumour and it's in your brain, what people are going to hear is cancer. And you don't want cancer in your brain. And so that for people could trigger a traumatic response. So how would you know if you're experiencing trauma rather than a stress response? I've put some examples. I've put the list of PTSD symptoms. You don't actually have to have all of these. So you may get flashbacks, you may not. You may get intrusive memories. So that's where thoughts pop into your head about what happened and you weren't wanting to think about it. It just happens to you. You may get dreams or nightmares about it, or you may get dreams or nightmares about other things. So these days when we think about dreams and nightmares, we're more interested in what's the feeling that goes with it rather than the contents. So if you have an uptick in dreams that are making you feel very anxious, that's something that we would kind of say, yes, it doesn't have to be about the traumatic event. The traumatic event is generating the anxiety and it's presenting itself as anxiety dreams or nightmares. Feeling distressed when you come across something similar and it feels like your whole body's reacting to it. You may become avoidant of certain things because it reminds you and you then react to that reminder. You might not remember all or part of the traumatic event, and that's not uncommon. As a species, we're actually wired to forget. We are not wired to remember. And where things are particularly difficult, our brains will protect us by kind of hiving bits off. These days, it's acknowledged that people, for example, who have to spend time in the in certain units in the hospital, they can actually find it traumatic. And so the doctors and nurses now keep logs of what happened so they can try and help people put their memories back together again so they have a better understanding of what happened. So that should happen in maternity care, particularly where a woman's experience of delivery has gone off birth plan. So they've ended up having to do things that weren't in the original birth plan. Someone's supposed to document it all and then go through the woman with it go through it with the woman at a later date to try and help process those memories and reduce some of the stress and anxiety. So it's a known phenomenon. Feeling detached from other people, and having problems kind of thinking ahead, and being hyper alert. So we talk about startle response. So an exaggerated startle response is kind of when you really, really massively jump at something that kind of before you'd have just turned your head, that kind of thing. So as I say, you don't have to have all of these to have a diagnosis of PTSD, and this list is here. So if you need it, you can then take it along to your GP, and we do now have reasonable access to trauma-informed mental health services. So it should be possible to get support for that if you need it. So bearing all that in mind, what kinds of things can you do to help you manage these kinds of life changes? So I think one of the things that I said was, these are things that don't happen to you very often. As adults, we can very much have this idea that we should be able to deal with everything. We should know, that's part of being adult. You know what to do, when to do it. The thing is that things that don't happen very often, why would that be the case? Why put that additional pressure on yourself to expect to know how to do everything all the time? I really like this quote from Helen MacDonald. Her book is called H is for Hawk, and she's talking about and describing how she came to terms with her father's death. And her father's death had been unexpected. And this is a quote from what she says, and she talks about being a novice is safe. When you're learning how to do something, you don't have to worry about whether you're good at it or not. But when you've done something and you've learned how to do it, you're not safe, because being an expert opens you up to judgment. So they're approaching something with a beginner's mind, and if you can, finding a way to say to other people, either I've not done this before, or it's a very long time since I've done this. So for example, if I was going to be moving house, I haven't moved house now for over 30 years. I used to do it very regularly, but I haven't done it for a very, very long time. And actually saying to other people, I don't know, all the rules have changed. It's very different to how I do know it's very different to how it was when I used to do it. So having that beginner's mind and being able to admit that you don't know. The problem with it is that for some people, saying that they don't know makes them feel vulnerable, and it adds to the stress, and they don't feel comfortable doing that. And asking others for help and advice. Other people are actually, depending on the kind of information you're wanting or needing, they're quite often willing to help, and they're quite often willing to share their experience. But you can feel a bit of an idiot asking. So we can be reluctant, and we can also be reluctant to let other people help us, because it can feel embarrassing, and we might think that our problem's not worth it, and that we should just, put our big girl pants on and get on with it. Or indeed big boy pants, or whatever kind of pants it is you want to wear. But the idea is that, you're supposed to just kind of find a way to soldier through, rather than saying, actually, you know what? I don't know a lot about this. I really do need some help and support. And that's one of the good things about the Pituitary Foundation. It has got that help and support there for you, to help make sense of your experiences with your condition. So the power of now and clock time. Eckhart Tolle, his book is quite mind-bending to me. But there's a lot about it that I like. It took me a while to get my head around it. One of the things he talks about is the power of now. So only this present moment is real. So basically what he's talking about is the idea that in this present moment, right here, right now, all you're doing, hopefully, is watching this webinar, and nothing else is happening. Nothing bad else is happening. That's all that's happening. And what he argues is that actually most of the time, our nows, our present moments, are actually, most of them are okay. even when we're going through something that is really stressful and really difficult, most of the nows, the immediate things that's right in front of us, are actually fine. The problem is our head goes off thinking about the past and the future and drags stuff into the now and makes it difficult. And so he talks about if you can learn to let go of worries about the past and the future. And there are other approaches like mindfulness that can help you to learn to watch the noise in your head rather than get sucked into it. And he also talks about the idea of clock time. So, yes, you can stay in this present moment, which is what children do. Children inhabit the now in a way that adults don't. So, for a child, a moment is kind of never ending. And you say to them, you can have 5 more minutes in front of the telly. They have no idea what that means. We have to teach them about clock time. We have to teach them about planning. And then as adults, it becomes ingrained and we forget about the experience of the power of now. So he talks about if you can relearn the power of now as an adult, and then when you need to go back to clock time to do planning. So create that sense of how something might be broken up to be dealt with in smaller chunks. Because when we get anxious, when we're stressed about something, what we do is we focus on everything that has to be done. So if you're thinking about moving house, you see all the stuff in your house that's got to be sorted and boxed up. And some of it you may have to get rid of. And then you've got to put it all in a truck and it's all got to be moved. And then you've got to unpack it all at the other end. And then there's decorating and Lord knows what else to do. And your brain reacts as though all of those things are happening right now and the stress you feel is overwhelming. Whereas if you can break it down into smaller chunks and then deal with each one as they come up and stay in the power of now more often, you reduce some of that stress. So one of the things I use is this mantra: all I have to do now is, and then whatever it is. And so depending on my level of stress, the chunks that I will divide my day down into will be bigger or smaller. So on a good day, the chunks will be quite large. All I have to do now is do this webinar. Other days, the chunks will actually be much smaller because my stress levels are higher. And so I need to keep the chunks a bit smaller just to try and keep me grounded. And I will actually talk to myself. Don't always do it out loud, but I will actually say it. All I have to do now is, and just keep on grounding myself and kind of keeping the chunks small so I don't get overwhelmed. The other thing that can really help is recognizing the familiar in amongst the unfamiliar. So when we have a key life event and there's an awful lot of elements to it, there will be some aspects to it that you have done before. It's not that all of it will be new and strange. There will be some bits that are actually quite familiar. And sometimes we can reassure ourselves and reduce some of our stress by recognizing the familiar in amongst the unfamiliar. So when my husband had his stroke, I used to reassure myself. I had no idea what was going to happen in terms of his care and such, but there were some things that were very familiar. I knew how to get from our house to the hospital. I knew where to park when I got to the hospital. When the hospital said he needed certain things, I knew which shop to go to buy those things to take them back to the heart. So there's a lot about it that I already knew how to do. And recognizing the familiar in amongst the really strange stuff actually really helped. So those things can be beneficial. Developing self-compassion. So it's very, very easy to say that we should just get on with it. I've already talked about the big pant phenomenon. But actually that internal critic, that kind of negative way of talking to ourselves doesn't help. What it does is tends to cause more stress. So when you get on your own case, when you apply your own boot to your own backside, what you're doing is setting off your stress response. And so one of the ways to manage that potentially is this idea of developing some self-compassion. It's a counter to our internal self-critic, that internal voice that kind of gives you a hard time. We basically need it from other people, but we can generate it for ourselves too. That warmth, that kindness, that self-encouragement. This is to remind me to not spend the entire time talking, to let you answer some of your questions. So we need the warmth, we need the kindness, we need the encouragement from other people. It enables us to grow, develop, and change. But we can also do it for ourselves. That self-compassion is important. And people say, oh, I can't do that. You know, if I don't apply my own boot to my own backside, I'll never get anything done. But actually, overstressing yourself is unhelpful. And learning how to do the self-compassion doesn't make you lazy. It doesn't turn you into an unhelpful slug. There are three core components to it. So mindfulness, that sense of acknowledging how you're feeling about something. And that's not to have a pity party, but it's actually just to listen to yourself and see how you're feeling. The same as if one of your friends talked to you. You wouldn't accuse them of kind of, you know, yeah, as I say, holding a pity party. You would actually want to know how they felt. Well, you need to know how you feel too. The second part is having some sense of common humanity. We all get things wrong. There are all kinds of things that we do not know how to do. There are all kinds of things that everyone finds stressful. Being diagnosed with a pituitary condition, everyone is going to find that stressful. It doesn't matter who they are. And that is an aspect of common humanity. It makes us like other people. And kindness, being kind to ourselves, saying some kind words to ourselves that we'd use if a friend was in the same situation, and wanting them to feel that we love and care for them. And you can increase the impact of that by placing your hands over your heart as you say something nice to yourself and genuinely mean it. Research has also said that if you can identify your top 3 key strengths and use them to help you deal with whatever the life transition is, good, bad, or indifferent, it can really help. Now, this is a list. It's actually a very old list. It's nearly, if you thought the 1960s was like old, this is like 2000 years old because it came from Aristotle. It's actually being used as the foundation for positive psychology. So there are researchers currently using this. It's not an exhaustive list. So this is the list that Aristotle said we need in order to live a good life. You may have other key strengths that are not on this list. List making is one of mine. It's not on that list, but for me, it's hugely important. And then you can turn your top strength into a superpower. So my alter ego is List Woman, and she can do some quite extraordinary things. These 2 books I really, really like. They're really short. They're both by the same author, Ted Bowman. He's a poet, but he's also a psychotherapist. And in the first one, The Loss of Dreams, he argues that there are many different kinds of grief, but that loss of dreams, so where you have been diagnosed with a pituitary condition, for example, and it's kind of changed your life course, he talks about how that's a special kind of loss in its own right. And his book is about helping you to understand whether or not what you're experiencing is the kind of grief that he would call a loss of dreams. And then lots of people talked to him after he'd written that book. And he wrote the companion book, which is called Finding Hope When Dreams Have Shattered. And he talks about how do you foster hope, because it really, really matters. And so various things, there are all kinds of ideas in the book. Again, it's very, very short, and there's kind of stories from different people, and there's various ideas that you might want to think about and try. One of the things he talks about is the importance, if you've gone through something very challenging, of teaching ourselves joy again, and actually allowing ourselves to have some positive experiences. He talks about the importance of supportive care, but also how difficult that can be, both to receive and to give, and to know how to do that. He talks about the peace of wild things. So he talks about the importance of nature, getting out into the world. He talks about the paradox of perspective. I've already talked about that a little bit. And he talks about the importance of telling your story. And we see that in Pit Life, Pituitary Life, the magazine. People telling their stories is a really important part of how you make sense of what's happened to you, and communicate it to other people. And then finally, some strategies for helping you to feel grounded. If all the rest of it feels like it's all just too much, and I was talking about overwhelm and overstimulation, these are really good for addressing that. So the simplest is the one at the top. Take a deep breath in and let it out slowly. You can always do that no matter where you are. When we're stressed and anxious, we shallow breathe. That can help to re-regulate our breath. One of the other things we can do is create a strong focus. So smelling or sucking an extra strong mint really works. So when cleaning your sinuses out, it's difficult to concentrate on anything else. It kind of creates a natural focus. If that feels a little bit not your thing, then there's other things you can do. So pushing your feet into the floor as hard as you can. It's a really odd thing to do. And because it's an odd thing to do, it's very powerful. Your brain kind of pays attention and goes, what are you doing? Likewise, if you grip on the edge of something as hard as you can, it's not something we often do. And again, your brain pays attention to that and it allows things to calm down. Journal writing and artwork, really, really important for some people to help understand and to ground themselves in what's happening so they can understand themselves. And then somatic movement, very, very gentle movements. So you can either move from side to side very gently, or you can go forward and back. You might want there to be some music or some sound. But that somatic movement, again, it's that just slowing everything down and helping you to feel grounded, kind of helping you to feel rebalanced. So I do believe that we now have time for questions.